Thank you, everyone. I'm going to make this presentation fairly brief, hopefully, and hopefully a little bit interesting, bringing some of the sort of AI concepts to life, because I think I'm the last presenter today, and I think it's only me and Dan who's going to be closing off that stands between you and drinks. So I do want to make this brief for you all. Just going to talk briefly about AI, how it can help. I'll reiterate some of the solution and how that ethical side of the way we're designing these products is being applied to something like automated arrears prevention, as Chris mentioned before, and then just generally kind of a few maybe thought-provoking thoughts around AI. So I think when we look at the risk register that a lot of housing associations in the industry is facing, there's lots of concerns around skills and employment. Net zero decarbonisation, credit rating, damp and mould is a big one, ESG, etc. And then we also have technology and ethics, trying to make sure that we collect data in a responsible manner and then use it in a responsible manner as well. So let's go into what is artificial intelligence. So this was briefly mentioned by Chris. It is the theory and development of computer systems being able to perform tasks normally requiring human intelligence, things like visual perception, speech recognition, decision making, and translation between languages. So huge application overall. And in a way, I like to think of it in a very simplistic way. It's almost like a supercharged human. So doing tasks at a faster speed or a larger quantity than you would be able to do it maybe yourself. So when we talk about arrears prevention, those sorts of things an income officer could do. Of course they could, but do they have time? Maybe not, so that's where these solutions then come into play. So what are the main ethical concerns in the social housing sector? There's quite a lot. I will focus on a few. Things like data privacy and security. So what is happening with that data? How is it being used? Where is it going? There's worries about, black box solutions, etc. And then things like bias and fairness, can it be used to drive improvements within the sector? Transparency and accountability, making sure that we know where it's going, how it's being used. Sustainability and environmental impact, can it be used to drive improvements in the impact on the environment? We talk a lot about smart homes and things. A lot of those things are powered by AI solutions. In the community and tenant engagement and equitable access, making sure that technology solutions don't exclude certain subgroups. So, if we're putting forward a digital journey, making sure that everyone has access to that is really important. I think there's probably quite a few economic and employment impacts. A lot of people are concerned that is it replacing people? Is it replacing, what humans can do? Yes, I think probably to a certain extent, but it's also you can use in conjunction to improve performance in general. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then finally, legal compliance and policy alignment. So just making sure we're staying in the lane of being really clear of what's legal and what's responsible designing AI solutions. So some of the three things that I probably would like to focus on are these. So responsible data use, I think, is really, really important and crucial, as is removing bias. I'll explain a little bit about that as well. And then finally, transparency and explainability of solutions, so making sure we know exactly what it is. So I'll give an example, a real life example from my own, because I think that helps me understand things. I was at the GP's last week, and I was going for the usual cholesterol and I think it was diabetes type tests. So yes, I'm of a certain age now where they call me up for these tests. As I was sat there with the nurse, she was taking my results and then she was putting it into a form around sort of my profile, and we got to a field which was around ethnicity. So I wasn't born in the UK, so we were looking through for white European or white other, and there was a whole list of ethnicities there, and I could see the nurse was sort of going through it all, and then she kind of looked at me and I looked at her, and I'm sort of thinking here with my AI head, being sort of probably provoked by the work that I've been doing with Mobysoft. And then I sort of sat there, and she sort of looked at me and she said, well, we use this data to, to look at certain ethnicities and understanding maybe if they could have certain illnesses or predispositions to illnesses, as well as sort of assessing your kind of health age, if you like. And we've all had these, haven't we, where we've gone in and we've put our information in, how much alcohol we drink, and how much fruit and veg do we eat per day, and it gives you an estimated health score or an age group. So 32 would be great, but it's probably not for me, unfortunately. But it did make me think, I think, around consent. So the responsible data use. I mean, she didn't actually say to me, this is where this data is going, or this is how it's being used. I also she didn't say to me, you don't have to provide this data at all as well. So that's one area which I think is really important, is making sure that we're collecting that data and being sensitive in why we're using it. So especially with things that are of personal nature, such as ethnicity, etc. Removing bias. So this is using large data sets gives us a lot more confidence. But if you build it yourself, how do you know that you haven't introduced any bias? And by that we mean, for example, if you, again, going back to my sort of example with the GP and ethnicity, how do we know that certain ethnic groups don't go to the doctor? In which case you don't collect the information, in which case is that information really true, and is it giving you a true reflection? So we need to think about these things, and we need to think about maintainability. And then finally, how is the data being used? So transparency and explainability of those solutions. It would have been good if the nurse sat there and told me, this is where your data is going to be used. You've given this information to me, and this is how we're going to use it. I'm not giving her a hard time. She's probably got a lot more other things that are more important, but it just made me think about it in this sort of particular way. And we'll come round to why those three things I think are particularly important. There are AI ethical guidelines and frameworks, because it is becoming a bit of a buzzword. There is AI solutions popping around left, right and centre to a certain extent. So there are lots of sort of concerns around it. I think what happens is initially we have frameworks. If they don't work and the industry doesn't self-regulate, what happens is sooner or later we'll get some legislation. That hasn't happened yet, but these are some of the ones that we do have. The AI ethics guidelines by the UK government, that's all published. Alan Turing Institute of AI Ethics Guidelines, obviously that's going to be quite an interesting sort of guideline. The ICO, again, has some published information on it. Centre of Data Ethics and Innovation, British Standards Institution, Royal Society of AI Ethics Framework, and then European Union has its own guidelines, and there's probably quite a few more international frameworks as well. So it's worth just looking into them, I think, in general. So how do Mobysoft use AI and maintains its ethical grounding? We recognise that we are using more and more sort of AI, not just in income management. I think in repairs, there's been quite some work around damp and mould. And so we need to recognise that we have to protect that data that we're using, and just really make sure that when we're designing solutions, we're doing it in an ethical way. So we've created an AI and Ethics Council. So we meet on a monthly basis, and they are members within the team. So it's not just one person's responsibility. And we can't say that then if something goes wrong with an AI solution, we're going to blame the data scientist who designed this. That would be unfair. So we have lots of people within our organisation coming together. We also educate ourselves externally, but we'll also bring speakers internally. And then eventually we'll look to have customer representation. So we're reaching out to customers saying, what do you think about this? And then outcomes will always have validation against ethical principles. So finally, I'm going to just go into the use of AI in automated arrears prevention, as Chris mentioned before. So you'll be familiar with this circle about how we take that data, we generate some insights, we send the campaigns, we take those results, and then we improve the model. So similarly to what Chris showed beforehand, we're hoping that the effects of the message stop somebody from going into arrears before that happens. So it is a predictive model in its truest form, and that is driven by the data that we have. So yeah, sorry, I think these slides all, for some reason, are repeating themselves slightly. We got there? Yeah, that's the one that we're looking for, to see that change in behaviour with a tenant. And these are some of the messages that we've got here. And again, similarly, as I said before, the benefits. So we're looking to prevent tenants from falling into arrears. Again, it is a prediction, so we are looking at that point before something actually happens. But we think that the benefits here are really, really quite beneficial to the officers, to the tenants, and actually to us as an organisation. So how is that actually applied in an ethical manner? So when we have this data, we've anonymised it. So when we look at the data and we've built the model, it's not looking at a person in particular. It's all anonymized. It's all kind of thrown together, and we only look at the transactional data that we have. So that's the only thing that we look at, and we make sure that it's in line with our data use policies that we have with our customers. We remove bias, so the model is unaware of individual circumstances, and by that we mean we don't augment it with things such as gender, age or ethnicity. It'd be really easy for us to sort of build something in and say, okay, everybody over 65 is a really good payer, therefore don't look at it. But that's introducing bias, and then actually the model isn't very accurate. And then we don't augment at the moment with any external data. If we do, we'll probably be very careful about how we do that. I think this is really interesting point, because I think it's very easy to build or actually put bias in if you don't have a big data set as well where you can look at that data. And then finally, explainability. So the results are explainable. The model that we've created for automated arrears prevention is fairly understandable to most people. If we show the results, as we have been with our customers, they can see it and they agree with it fairly quickly. And it's been fascinating for us to watch when we've sat with an income officer, they've looked at the results, looked at somebody's statement, and they very quickly can process that information and tell us, yes, that person looks like they're going to fall into arrears. So then, therefore, we know, the model's doing what it's doing. But then you need to multiply that by thousands and thousands of transactions that you've got. And that's where it becomes a little bit more impossible for a human to do it. And that's why you use an AI model. So again, it's just providing that explainability, how it works, that it's not a black box solution, and that, we can always explain the results that we come to. So if you're introducing AI to your organisation, think about things like an AI council, think about the ethics of it. Look how AI will change roles and jobs in the next 12 to 24 months. I think it will be changed, but I do think it is working together alongside people as well. You can't just have an AI solution on its own. You still need people to look and validate the results. Embed that culture. So definitely embrace it. Don't be too scared of it. Be curious and just keep questioning the results. And then training is really important. So we're training ourselves internally, but we'll also make sure that we communicate and train with our customers. And then finally, just just to be transparent fully, I did use AI to create this presentation. I used ChatGPT, but I used it to my advantage. So I went and researched and said, ChatGPT, tell me all the ethical frameworks that we had. And in a couple of seconds, it gave me that information. But what I also did is I didn't just use that data and then threw that presentation back at you. I looked at those results, validated, and thought, okay, maybe I want to focus on these things, or maybe I want to focus on those things. And that's where I think you need to work together with AI solutions. So I didn't just take what ChatGPT told me, I went and applied my own human thinking to it. And then finally, the last thought-provoking snippet of the day, and I have this discussion quite a lot with our data scientists, is that data doesn't care, and neither do AI models for that matter. So that's why it's really important that humans, people, product people such as Chris and Josh, are there to sort of say, okay, so what's so adding that human element of things, rationalising the results, questioning what's coming through there, because the data does not care, and you need to be very, very careful about that. And that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Do you use ChatGPT for anything else? Like, you've obviously helped you with your presentation.
Yeah.
But do you sort of like put any personal information into it, or do you just literally just ask it for a specific thing?
Yeah, I think at the moment, and we were just talking about this actually, so no, not in a specific work manner. I would certainly not use any data or customer data and put it in ChatGPT, because it's open source at the moment. So you do have to be really mindful of when you're using that. For me, it was just kind of really to experiment with it, see what you can do. And it is a slightly different way of thinking. So I think we were all used to putting things in Google and getting a result back. With ChatGPT, it's more sort of generative, and it just the best way I can explain it synthesizes a lot of data in a very, very quick manner. So I have used it for things like LinkedIn posts, for example. And if I've said, here's a whole bunch of text, give me make this shorter into two sentences, and it does it very, very quickly in a really clever way. That would have taken me hours to think of, because I'm not a very good marketing person, for example. But in that sense, I think that's a really good way and use of ChatGPT. But it's definitely not. It's not ready. It's still emerging, I would say, in a lot of ways. There are things that can be useful, but yeah, you have to be careful with it. And like I said, apply that human element and that thinking of, what you're giving that data away, what's happening to it. Always think about it in those instances.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Dan.